Welcome to the Open Forum in the Villages, Florida. In this show, we talk to leaders of clubs and interesting folks who live here in the Villages to get perspectives of what is happening here in the Villages, Florida. We are a listener-supported podcast. There will be shout-outs for supporters in episodes.
This is Mike Roth. And listeners, I'm thrilled to share with you this podcast, which is my passion project for you. This podcast brings you knowledge, inspiration, and a lot of things that people need to know about the villages and the people living here. Be sure to hit the follow button to get the newest episode each week. Creating this podcast is a labor of love, even though it demands more time I can easily spare. Now, here's where you come in. You can help us keep the podcast alive and thriving. How? By becoming a supporter. The easy way for you to support us is to visit our podcast webpage, openforuminthevillagesflorida.com, and click on the supporter button at the top of the page, or the purple supporter box. Even a small donation of $3 to $10 a month makes a big difference, and you can cancel your subscription at any time. Your support means the world to us. Stay curious, stay inspired, and keep those headphones on. I hope everyone enjoys today's show. This is Mike Roth on Open Forum in the Villages, Florida. I'm here today with Alexandra Robertson, who is the Senior Vice President of Growth at Visory Health, a leading prescription discount card transforming how everyone, including veterans and families, can reduce their prescription costs.
Alexandra draws from her experience in the venture capital-backed Silicon Valley startups.
She has been recognized for enhancing positive change and access to affordable prices. Thanks for joining me, Alexandra.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about Visory Health and how long that's been around? Because until recently, I never even heard of it.
Yes, so Visory has been around since March 1st of 2022, so we're about 2.5 years old, a little older. But really, we set out to make medications accessible and affordable for everyone. And over those last 2.5 years, we've become a leading prescription discount card. And really, it's because healthcare is something that really impacts everyone on a daily basis. And especially as not only insurance costs rise or prescription costs rise, people are looking for alternative solutions. And I think part of the reason that we've been so successful so far is because we really do try to keep things simple for our consumers. We don't require coupons for every month or for every medication. We simply try to offer a great price. All they need to do is show our discount card to the pharmacist when they're picking up their prescription. And so we try to just keep it really easy for people. And so that's really been our goal, is to get out there and make people aware of the options that they have available to them.
Now, how do you distribute your cards?
Yes. So there's a couple of different ways. One is by going to our website. They can ask for a physical card. And then the most common way is really what we call a digital prescription card. So we have an app that you can download, whether you have an Android or an iPhone, and then it sits within that application, so that all they have to do, and it doesn't change, right? So we always offer a great price, so they're not having to worry about getting a coupon, which other discount cards do. They require you to get the latest coupon in advance of going to the pharmacy. So once you have the application, or you've asked us to send you a physical card, then you have your own Visory discount card that is free to use for you, your whole family, everyone.
Is there a cost to obtain one?
It is completely free for anyone to use, and it doesn't expire. It doesn't need to be, quote, activated. It's already live, and you just need to show up to the pharmacist. We work directly with pharmacies across the nation. So we've got over 36,000 today where it's available. For the villages, it's Publix it's CVS, Walgreens, those types of pharmacies where they can go and simply show the card to that pharmacist if
Yeah,
they'd like to use
that's
that.
smart because I looked it up on your website to see if my pharmacy was covered. And sure enough, it was.
Yes, good.
And interestingly, the pharmacist there, the years, has offered me a different brand pharmacy card than yours. So I'm going to pick up yours to make sure that I get the best deal.
Yep, we
Well,
love that. Yep.
now, what are some of the biggest challenges that senior citizens face when it comes to managing prescription drug costs? And I know it's going to change next year, which is only when people are listening to this, we're in January, so it has changed. What are the biggest challenges people face?
So I think some of the biggest challenges right now are around transparency and pricing. There was a study that JAMA, which is a peer-reviewed publication, came out with maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago that said a growing number of older adults can't afford their prescription medications, with 1 in every 5 adults, 65 and up, either skipping, delaying, or taking less medication because of cost. So I think that is a really large challenge that we've seen. And then the other piece I would say is really understanding your benefits like Medicare Part D if you have it right now. And yes, this will change in 2025, coverage gap that we call the donut hole. Once you go past your initial coverage phase, which I believe is around 545 for 2024, you then have to pay 25% of the cost of your medications up to $8,000 in 2024. So in
And in
1 year.
2025, which is where we are today, I understand the maximum that a senior could pay out for drugs is $2,000 if it's an FDA-approved drug. Is that true?
Correct. Yes. So what's going to happen, what's happening now is that in 2025, you have a higher initial phase of $2,000 as opposed to the $545 limit. But then you immediately enter that catastrophic phase for the rest of that year once you meet that deductible.
Meet that
I,
threshold.
right. And then you'll pay a much smaller coinsurance for the brand or generic drugs. But what I would also say is $2,000 can still be, depending on the types of medications and how many of them you're taking, which we know just as you age, it tends to be higher, right, than when you're younger. You may still not reach that $2,000 though. So I think then what everyone who's listening should do is try to understand what are the medications that are for chronic conditions that they're taking, whether it's daily that they fill on a regular basis, how much would that be? And if it's not $2,000 and you're not reaching that out-of-pocket max, then what I would suggest you do is look to alternatives like Visory Health, where you may just want to find the cheapest price. Right? If you're not going to reach a 2,000, where then once you hit that, it's much lower. But if you never reach it, it's better maybe for you then just to get a great price for your prescriptions.
Many of the seniors are taking drugs that are advertised on television. And as soon as a drug is advertised on television, I feel that the drug is a minimum of $300 a month, whatever it is, for whatever condition you have. Am I wrong about that?
A lot of those are brand name drugs. So yes, brand
and
names tend to be higher. And part of that is the process for them to actually come out and manufacture the drug. So another option is always to see, is an alternative with a generic prescription available, because generics are vastly more affordable than a brand name drug.
they're supposed to be. Sometimes they're not, much less expensive. I was talking to a prior guest on the show, and he said that he gets his Eliquis from Canada because he saves $1,000 a year. If he were to use your card, your program, would the relative cost be relative to buying it in Canada, which is, to me, somewhat chancy?
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. I can tell you that on average for generics, which is mostly what a prescription discount card is used for, it's used a little bit for brands, but more often than not, it's for generic medications. And we save on average 80% of the cost. Now, sometimes depending on the drug, it might be higher. Sometimes it might be lower, but average, we save about 80%.
And you're mainly talking about the drug costs below the $2,000 threshold?
It's irrespective of that. So it's just whatever the drugs someone or medications that someone might be taking are. If they equal less than 2,000, maybe you want to look for a prescription discount card like Visory to use that instead of this now Medicare Part D, right? It just depends on what the drug is and how much you could save using Visory. So
Sure.
it'll depend. It'll be different per person and what those chronic conditions are.
So what about those popular and terribly expensive weight loss drugs? Are you guys covering those?
You can use Visory for them. However, you're not going to see 80% because, again, those are newer drugs. So those are much higher cost to fill. So the discount might be slight, but that's a challenging that I can also say pharmacists who are even having trouble just trying to get the supply for it, right? Because over the last year, it's become very popular.
Yeah, very popular. And I guess the drug
That can be.
recently approved, are they covered under your program as well?
Yeah, we cover thousands of drugs. So any behind the counter medication we offer, it will be pharmacy specific as to whether you can use Visory with it. But as far as what you're able to potentially use Visory with, it would be the FDA approved. I call it behind the counter drugs versus the over the counter in front of the pharmacy.
So what are the biggest misconceptions that seniors have about healthcare costs and drugs in particular?
I think that's a good question. From what we can see, a lot of retirees may believe they don't have a lot of options to lower their costs. But I think there are ways to optimize healthcare spending by doing things like reviewing your plans annually during open enrollment and comparing plans. You don't always have to stick with the same one. Plans are changing year over year, so it can be helpful to look at what other options and plans are out there for you to use. Also, making sure you're utilizing your preventative care benefit. I know that's a big for a lot of folks as they get older, making sure you're going to the doctor, you're doing frequent visits preventatively. So if something's starting to happen, we can catch it early because that will always give you a better health outcome. For other folks, it could be even things like exploring Medicaid or pharmacy assistance programs if you have limited incomes. Those are all available to people. So it's not just because you're on a specific Medicare plan that you have to stick with that for years. There are other options that you can evaluate in that open enrollment period if you want to.
I get the books in the mail and they're about 600 pages long.
That's
And
right.
although you can tell for sure what drugs you were taking last year, you can't predict which drugs you're going to be prescribed in the coming year. At least I haven't figured out how to do that. Is there a way to do that? To figure out the best Medicare Part D plan?
That is tough because most of the medications, a lot of them should be covered, but it's tough, I think, to predict. It's a tough question, Mike. It's tough to predict the future, I think, in terms of what could happen. Making sure you have a good Medicare Part D, or do you want to look at Medicare Advantage, Part C, that maybe is more encompassing of things as well, just to make sure that you are covered for maybe an unforeseen circumstance. But that's why I think also shopping around for your prescriptions using Visory. Also, you can look at different pharmacies to see what makes the most sense for you. But yeah, that's a tough one. I know they have a Medicare Plan Finder tool, and I can try and send that to you after this, where you can check to see which plan is going to give you the best coverage for your current medications. So you can try to see maybe if you think something for the following year, you could try and look those up just to see.
Well,
But they do have that.
the other drug cost that most seniors wind up with is the over-the-counter vitamins, minerals, supplements that are recommended to them. And a bottle of supplement could cost more than the prescription statin drug. So it's a crazy thing. And those are not covered under your plan, are they? The over-the-counter ones?
We do offer some over the counter, but that will be pharmacy specific. So we recommend looking on our website or within our app to see if there is something that is covered, just so you can, again, because we're always trying to educate the folks before they come to the counter. So if they want to know what maybe a supplement would look like that may be available to them based on where they live and the pharmacy that they may go to.
Let's take a quick break and listen to a Alzheimer's tip from Dr. Craig Curtis.
So if one of our listeners want to go to one of your seminars that you put on regularly, how do they make a reservation to do that?
The easiest way is to go to our website, which is www.craigcurtismd.com, or call our office at 352-500-5252.
Thanks, Dr. Curtis.
Thank you, Mike.
With over 20 years of experience studying brain health, Dr. Curtis's goal is to educate the Villages community on how to live a longer, healthier life. To learn more, visit his website, craigcurtismd.com, or call 352-500-5252 to attend a free seminar. With over 20 years of experience studying brain health.
Thank you,
Okay.
Dr. Curtis. Alexandra, share with us your knowledge about some alternative resources that retirees can attempt to use to save money on prescription drugs.
Yeah, so some alternative resources for saving on prescription drugs are really going to be a couple of things. We touched on this a little bit earlier in the program, but one is going to be if your prescriptions aren't covered or perhaps they're really expensive. And again, this is maybe a new chronic condition where now you're required to take this on a monthly basis, or you're going to need prescriptions monthly. You can consider asking your doctor if a generic exists. There are generic alternatives coming up every so often that the brand timeline expires. We're now able to offer a generic where it's effectively got the same medication in there. So you can use that as an option to be more affordable. And then depending on the drug, there are pharmacy assistance programs. We call them TAPS, pharmacy assistance programs, for those who have limited incomes if it's a specific drug. So they can go online and see if they would be eligible and if their drug is eligible for that to be covered as well to help offset some of the costs. And then, of course, prescription discount cards like Visory Health, where you're able to try and save on mostly generic medications that you may be taking daily or monthly for those chronic conditions where you can save.
Can seniors save by shopping around at different pharmacies? Are the prices for these prescription drugs different enough to make it worthwhile? I'm not talking 50 cents a month different, but can you save $30 or $40 a month by moving from a Kroger pharmacy to a Walgreens pharmacy or from a Walgreens to a Kroger?
It's definitely possible there that you could, depending again, always asterisk all of this, depending on the medication, it'll be different, right? But just because you see one pharmacy price at one pharmacy, that does not mean it's the same across all the pharmacies in the US. So there may be different prices and they could be as little as 50 cents and they can be much higher. I believe when we did our survey, a lot of people between 35 and up are willing to even move a prescription if they can get a $5 savings. So if it's not too far out of your way, or if maybe it's, for instance, a Publix or a Kroger where they also have grocery available there. So you're shopping while they're filling your prescription and you'd rather switch it so that you can all in one.
Yeah, I spent many years in Cincinnati, and sometimes
Okay.
finding the right pharmacy was difficult. Here in the Villages, it seems you drive down the street, every shopping center has a pharmacy. Is your card program also honored in what I'm going to call mom and pop pharmacies, where it's not part of a chain?
We do have some mom and pop pharmacies. I would say there are thousands of them. We're not available at all of them, but we call them independent pharmacies, where maybe they have one location or they have a couple locations. We do offer and work with some of them. So that is a potential. The app and the website are really the best places if you're, no matter where you're listening, to see if there is a local pharmacy, or if it's local and it's a mom and pop, as you say, you can, your pharmacist, they know you. So you can ask them if that's something that they accept, right?
What about durable medical equipment? Everything from a back brace to a walker. Sometimes they are prescription. Would they be covered by your card?
For right now, it's really just prescription medications.
Okay.
So that's going to be the area of focus that we're trying to solve for, because again, we've got an increase in family health insurance of about 7%. You've got drug costs increasing about 15% on average. So we're trying to alleviate the ability of people not picking up their medications, or earlier, for someone to skip or delay taking a medication, that's not going to give them the best health outcome, right? We want to keep them on that medication as it's prescribed. So in order to do that, we're trying to really give folks the best health outcome and to keep them doing what they love. And so for right now, we're focused on prescription medications.
So insulin, what is the outlook on insulin costs for 2025? First of all, is insulin covered by your program?
We do offer insulin. Yes, that's a prescription that would be covered in general. I know they're going to have the $35 monthly cap where Medicare beneficiaries don't need to pay more than that they'll be covered by Part D or through Part B with an insulin pump, but it is still available to use with Visory. And that would be part of the out-of-pocket cap, right?
So if someone needed an EpiPen every other month or so, that would be covered because it's a prescription product?
Yes.
Okay, good. I understand that. Now, what about who have been buying their drugs from Canada? What would you say to them?
That's a great question. People are looking for alternatives for more affordable medication.
Mhm.
So I can see the draw to getting something from a cheaper place. I would also say, though, that you want to know that you have the medication that you're going to need when you need it. And
real
so it's a real thing. Being able to go down the street to your local pharmacy and pick it up, there's something to be said about that when you've got it in your hand and you're walking out with it. So I would say it's worth at least checking for an alternative like the Visory Health app or website to see if you can just go down the street and get it filled when you need it versus trying to plan and then hope it doesn't get delayed with shipments and all sort of those sort of things that are maybe a little more outside of your control. You can have that peace of mind. I think that's important.
Frankly, I've always been worried about the quality. Are you actually going to get the same pill from a Canadian pharmacy that you're going to get from your local Walgreens or Publix?
And I don't know enough about where you can buy it in Canada to know whether that's true or not, but I could certainly see that being a consideration.
Is there any special advice you'd like to give to our listeners about their healthcare costs and prescription costs?
I think the big things are understanding your coverage options is important and making sure you're fully aware of the plans that are available to you and what's covered. For instance, just original Medicare and you'd like to add Medicare Part D during open enrollment, or you'd like to start using Medicare Advantage, making sure you know what is included in each of those pieces of Medicare, as well as prevention. So making sure you're doing preventative care, I think that's really key, as well as comparing your plans annually during that open enrollment period, which typically is around middle of October through early December. And then when it comes to medications, you can look at different pharmacies to see where you'd like to fill your prescription drugs. And then if it makes sense to use the Visory Health prescription card when you go and pick it up.
So, can you give some special advice to our village residents who are less than the Medicare eligibility age? Okay, and they may have left their former employer, so they no longer have that coverage. How does your card plan fit in for them?
So I would say that they could probably even find more benefit with Visory Health. So earlier this year, we conducted a survey that found 48% of respondents over 55 had been forced to choose between prescriptions and essential bills. And then if you were 35 to 54, 45% of them faced similar decisions. And so you can still absolutely benefit from Visory Health with your prescriptions and when it comes to saving money on your prescriptions. And that's why we're working to help people understand the alternatives that they have, because a lot of them, so you have to bridge, you're trying to figure out how to bridge that gap. So if you no longer have maybe employer health care, but you're too young for Medicare, then you want to try and make sure, again, you're getting great prescription prices when you need them. So I would say that Visory Help is a really great resource, especially in that gap.
And for families, whether it's a husband and wife, or we have a lot of young families here in the Villages area because they have special neighborhoods for families. Do they need one account with Visory, or do they have to have an account for each member of the family?
They really just need one card. So there's no account creation process, which is why I think it's so great for really everyone in the Villages. You just need to download the app to get that card, but that card does not change from person to person. So anyone can use it. And especially if you're a family or you're maybe in that 35 to 54 bucket, we think this is a really great resource because a lot of people, I call that sort of the sandwich generation. So oftentimes maybe you're taking care of kids as well as your parents. And so we're trying to, again, give you another resource because a lot of folks in that bucket may have employer healthcare coverage. But what's happened over the last couple of decades is that there's been a shift to high deductible healthcare plans. So a lot of those folks who are on a high deductible healthcare plan, about 78% never meet that out-of-pocket deductible. So again, you're trying to figure out then, if you're in the majority who's not going to meet it, how can you just get when you need a medication, which may be less frequent? You just want a great price, right? So we're trying to make sure that is available to them. And then we also have our app now has a version where if you need it in Spanish, our app is available in Spanish. And so I know we've got folks who's maybe their grandparents or their parents, they only speak Spanish, and they're able to now use this app and very seamlessly understand what medication they're trying to find, what the cost is, where they can go, and they can use that as well.
That makes sense. So, again, what is the website that they should go to get a card and set that up?
It is visoryhealth.com, VISORYHEALTH.com.
Thanks for being with us today, Alexandra.
Thank you, Mike.
Remember, our next episode will be released next Friday at 9 a.m. Should you want to become a major supporter of the show or have questions, please contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. This is a shout-out for supporters Tweet Coleman, Ed Williams, Dwayne Romich, Paul Sorgen, Kathy Loving, and Dr. Craig Curtis at K2 in the Villages. We will be hearing more from Dr. Curtis with short Alzheimer's tips each week. If you know someone who should be on the show, contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. The way our show grows is with your help. Text your friends about this show if you enjoyed listening, or just tell your friends about the show. We thank everyone for listening to the show. The content of the show is copyrighted by Roth Voice 2025. All rights reserved.
Lakembe.